All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's Wednesday webinar, Leveraging Service Providers and Vendor Relationships for Social Impact. This is Biz Gormley. I'm here at the EPIP headquarters and I'm joined on the line by our esteemed presenters. Sarah, Henry, Abe, and Susan is stuck in a transit nightmare, but is doing her best to join us. So I'm going to take a few minutes to welcome you guys to the call, give you a little bit of an overview about EPIP, let you know what to expect on today's presentation, and then we're going to welcome the presenters to introduce yourselves and then move into the kind of more formal questions that we have outlined for each of you to learn more today. Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy is what EPIP stands for, and we are a national network of foundation professionals, social entrepreneurs, and other change makers who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. Our mission is to develop emerging leaders committed to building a just, equitable, and sustainable society. And we do this by providing a platform for our community to connect with others, learn and practice leadership skills, and to inspire emerging ideas in the social sector. If you are new to EPIP or you're just hearing about us for the first time, we would love to learn more about you and talk more about what we have coming up, as well as membership opportunities and what doors that will open for you. So feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is here on the screen, biz@epip.org, and I'd love to learn more about you. We do have a few upcoming events. I encourage everyone to go to the website. It's www.epip.org/events. We have a variety of chapter events across the country, and even in the next week, actually. And one in particular, if you're going to be at the Neighborhood Funders Group Conference in Oakland, we're hosting an EPIP Bay Area happy hour. Tamir Novotny, our executive director, and myself will both be there, along with all the EPIP chapter leaders and members and colleagues of ours from around the country who are there for the conference. So if you're in the area or if you are going to be there for the conference, please come out and say hi. Our next webinar is actually in 2 weeks from today on June 22nd at 3 p.m. again, Eastern Time. The focus will be on leveling up or learning the management skills that will help you thrive in your career when passion is not enough. Also wanted to flag our EPIP annual conference is this fall in September in Baltimore, and registration, early bird registration is open. So all that on the website, please take a peek. Housekeeping for today. You'll see in your control panel, there is a question box. Please use that to type in any comments, content questions, and also if you have sound trouble or any issues hearing us or seeing the slides, just drop a note in there and I'll do my best to help you out. Our polls and questions are anonymous, and the webinar is being recorded. If you're going to be following us on social media, you want to live tweet or share posts on any other network, please use the hashtag EPIPwebinar. And at the very end, when you log out and the call closes, we are going to have a post-webinar survey pop up. So if you can take a peek at those questions, I think it's, sorry. I hear that there's sound issues. If you are having sound issues, please please go ahead and type into the question box if you are also having sound issues, so I can just resolve that before we move too quickly along. Okay, cool. So, sorry about that. Back to the slides. Yeah, so the survey, it helps us make sure that the content that we plan for future webinars is relevant to you and helps us make sure that we are delivering most useful tools for you. So please take that survey. The agenda for today's call, we're going to do a poll in 1 second to learn from you who's on the line. If anyone's still having sound issues, you may want to log out and log back in while we're just getting started in this initial period. We're going to do the poll in a minute, as I said. Speakers are going to introduce themselves, and then the 4 key questions that we're going to focus on today are what foundations and nonprofits need to know about hiring vendors, how to get the most from the work and for your money by being a good client, how to best leverage vendors to build capacity within your organization or your grantees organizations, and what it means to do good as an agency or a service provider. So actually, I'm going to pause now and launch our first poll. And while everyone is taking the poll, I'm going to ask if that is you, Susan. Were you able to call in?
I am right here.
Great. Wonderful.
Are we ready to go? We're doing the poll. So
yeah,
hold on.
We're doing the poll. And then I'm glad you called in. We're going to have you introduce yourself in just 1 minute.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. I understand.
Little technical difficulty.
I think we've all been there. So first question, what best describes your employer? It looks like the majority of people on the call today, 67%, are working at foundations. And then we have a couple people representing from philanthropic advisory firm, nonprofit, and other. So if you had to choose other because we did not reflect your workplace, feel free to type in the question box what your location, your job is. And in the meantime, we're going to run the next poll just to get a sense of, Okay, well, that poll got messed up. How early are you in your career is the next question. If you could type in, 1 to 5 years, been in this work for 10 years or more, just how many years have you been doing this work? Go ahead and pop that into the question box. Great. And while those answers are coming in, there's one more question we'd love to hear from you guys. What motivated you to sign up for today's conversation? What issues are most pressing for you? What are you most hoping to learn from the conversation today? While you type that in, it looks like most people are within 1 to 6 years into their career who have joined today. So there's no right or wrong answers, but if you do have a question that you hope to learn more about today or something that really stood out to you about the opportunity in today's webinar, would love for you to share those high points for us in the question box so we can make sure to answer your questions as proactively as possible. Great. So before we pass the mic over to our guest speakers today, I am going to preliminarily introduce Susan McPherson from McPherson Strategies, Henry Lee from HD Made, Abe Taleb from WeWork, and Sarah Judd Welch from Loyal, 4 founders and entrepreneurs and wonderful people who have a great mind for doing good in the world, as well as making valuable products and creating amazing campaigns and tools and strategies for their clients. They're 4 people that I respect a lot and I'm super excited to have on the call. So I want to thank you all before we dig in for making time and for preparing to connect with the EPIP community today. Two headlines of what people are looking for. One person is a new grant and office manager and is going to be choosing vendors. And another is responsible for selecting a lot of the vendors they work with for events and wants to think about the best way to do that. Also, people are interested in not just getting great services, but making an impact through the way that they connect with vendors and through operations and not just in granting dollars. So I'm going to open up the mic now for our presenters to kind of give us a sense of who you are and what you do, what your company is, how you got to this point in your career, and how does social impact take shape in your work. So welcoming from a horrific traffic situation, but a wonderful career. Susan, we'd love to hear from you first.
This is Susan McPherson, and thank you so much, Biz. I'm honored to be here and have had the pleasure of knowing you for many years. And But I have to say I am still in the middle of traffic nightmare, so I am on my phone and without the slides in front of me. So for all I know, I'm looking at, Disney World on my screen. Anyhow, I run a consultancy called McPherson Strategies. I often say I've had 9 lives at this point, working in corporate America for many, many years, ending up working for a wonderful consultancy, Fenton Communications, which was all about helping NGOs storytell and create advocacy and impact. But I left there about 3 years ago to create my own consultancy, and knock on wood, it's been going very well, and we work with major corporations such as JCPenney, Coca-Cola, Tiffany & Co., all with Blackbaud, as well as a variety of NGOs and nonprofits, all with the goal of helping them create social good and advocacy and partnerships, all with, again, through that lens of making the world a better place. So I kind of live this every single day of my life, and people often ask me, well, how do you have time to, do your, volunteer work and everything? And it's become the fact that my personal life and my professional life are completely intertwined. And I realize for some people that could be a very bad thing, but for me, it's extraordinarily rewarding and empowering. Because you just get to do the right thing every day. And then the world that you surround yourself with are people that are philanthropists and people who are running social enterprises and people who are really trying to help business be a force for good, and have a seat at the table with NGOs and governments. So I guess that gives you a bit of background. I'm fortunate to live in wonderful Brooklyn Heights. And I think that's probably more than you need to know, or more than people want to know.
No, that's great. Thank you, Susie. Henry, how about you?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Just want to say, Biz, thanks a lot for having me on this webinar. My name is Henry Lee. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I kind of started working in publishing for a very, very long time. And after publishing, I worked at ESPN and, worked on a lot of different businesses from just a brand development standpoint. And after all, years at a super corporate place, I started freelancing and I decided to start an agency, HG Made, with another former ESPN sort of executive. And lo and behold, like their first client was Robinhood. And if you're not familiar with Robinhood, they're a poverty-fighting foundation in New York City. They have some of the most innovative work, I think, to figure out, how to combat and fight poverty. And from there, it kind of took off as, a good portion of our work in the last 5 years has revolved around nonprofits foundation work. Everybody from Coalition for the Homeless, Breast Cancer Research Foundation, Women in America, and Markle Foundation, just to name a few. And I think one of the things that it's really done for myself personally and for the people who work here is that I think, I think people love working here, and they, it's been, I have to even say almost like a recruitment tool, that a portion of our work is definitely based around social impact. I think that personally for me, I've learned a lot, not just about, whether it's with Robinhood and learning about poverty in New York City, or Breast Cancer Research Foundation, where, some of the foremost scientists and doctors around the world have really, I was in front of them and they said that, we were eye to eye with this disease now, and we could fight it, really well in the next 20 years. And that's been really, really exciting, just personally. And I think that's led to actually is this year, I've been sort of in the process of talking to a number of nonprofits and joining a board, because I kind of want to see what it's like almost on the other side of the fence, and not from an agency fence. And I think some of the skill sets that I might bring might be a little bit different from maybe typical board members. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of my summary.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Abe?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Definitely excited for this this conversation here today. So I'm Abe Taleb. I'm one of the co-founders of ReWork, and we exist to help organizations, impact organizations, hire top talent. So what that means is we work with about 50% nonprofits, and about the other half of our clients are for-profit social enterprises. And we have an active community of now over 40,000 professionals who we help bring great opportunities to. I encourage all of you, if you're ever looking for your next opportunity, take 5 minutes, create a profile on our website, and we'll kind of send you great opportunities in this space. And then with that, and kind of the last question, when I got into this as I'd say an individual who was looking for meaning and purpose in my own work, and when I did not see a ton of great opportunities, kind of led to the founding of ReWork. But it's been very fortunate to hear the stories about what a great hire can mean to a team and how challenging that process is like. So I just kind of look back to a lot of the placements we've been able to make, and we've been able to work with Acumen, Ashoka, Echo and Green, Venture for America, Good Course. So we've been able to kind of work with a lot of great organizations in the impact space, and kind of hearing about a lot of the differences that a great individual can make to a team is always music to my ears, and I think it's really the impact that I look for in my work.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you so much. I just have to say quickly, Sarah, to help me both pull this webinar together and to bring together these amazing people. We would love to hear from you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having us, Biz, and thank you for everyone who's attending and on the line listening in. So I'm Sarah Judd Welch. I'm CEO and Head of Community Design of Loyal. Loyal is a community agency, and we work with brands to develop communities online. Most of our clients are coming to us with 4 different types of goals in mind: to understand their customers and community, to engage them, to retain them, and to collaborate with them. This means that we work with all different kinds of companies, ranging from brands as large as GE, nonprofits like National Geographic, and really early stage startups. So how I got here is kind of an interesting question. Community is a very niche field. Loyal is one of only probably like around 10 agencies in the world that focus specifically on community online. I've been running Loyal since 2012, though I feel like I've been doing some form of this for nearly my entire career. I started out working on Hillary Clinton's Senate 06 campaign, so last night was definitely exciting for me. So I definitely thought growing up that I would go into a career of politics, though of course, like perhaps some of you in the line, there came a point in time where I felt that I needed something a little bit more practical. So I ended up going into the private sector. I right out of college during the financial crash. I took a job at Goldman Sachs because it was the only job offer that I got. And luckily it was a great place to weather through that period of time. And while working at Goldman was exactly what many of you imagine it to be, really soul-sucking, I did fall in love with business there, and when I left, I knew that I wanted to work in the private sector. At that point in time, I went to my one friend who had started companies in the past, and I was like, hey, I know that I want to work for myself, but I don't know how. And I basically shadowed him for 6 months, just trying to learn as much as possible. And he happened to be working on a community platform at the time, and that's how I got introduced to the tech community in New York. And I just really fell in love with the role and function of community within tech companies that serves to connect customers and users of products to each other, and to also make them happy, to delight them. And I found that in many ways, by connecting people to each other, you're creating a lot of the same, though different kind of value, which can sometimes be an economic benefit when you connect people to each other, and certainly like the happiness that is developed by people having deeper relationships and feeling more connected to the world and to other people who are just like them, that has like a material difference in people's lives. So in that way, I kind of look at community as an extension of the career that I once imagined for myself working in politics. So I worked in tech for a number of years at Catchafire, which I'm sure some of you in the line are familiar with. If not, it is a platform that matches professionals who want to give their skills to nonprofits who need their help. And after that, I was the New York City General Manager for TaskRabbit. And TaskRabbit is also a community platform that helps people get chores done by matching them to local on-demand talents. And Loyal came out of the work that I did post leaving TaskRabbit when I was freelancing and just finding this really interesting opportunity and sort of having a sense of what I wanted to do, but not necessarily having a clear direction, and kind of like playing around and having fun in my work. That's where I identified the space that Loyal's in now, specifically building out a community agency. And that's where Loyal came from and how I got here. As far as how social impact takes shape in my work today, Loyal works with 1 to 2 nonprofits a year. Interestingly, nonprofits tend to generally understand community a little bit better than most large brands or even startups, even though startups and brands are definitely very hot on community right now. Nonprofits from day one are primarily membership-based. They're highly incentivized to engage the people who donate money to their causes. So they have like this natural sense of community building built in. So we've always worked with nonprofits along the way. And Biz, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Susan, are you still on the line? Okay. So while
I am here. Sorry, I was on mute.
Great, it was a nice surprise. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you actually now to help us think about what foundations and nonprofits need to know about hiring vendors. And can you
certainly.
Do you need me to throw you on the screen, or are you good?
Yes, that would be helpful. But I guess I should just add, because I was listening to everybody else's bios, and I run a business, but I also serve on several nonprofit boards and advise several nonprofits. I serve on the board of USA for UNHCR, which is the UN High Commission for Refugees, as well as Public Foundation. And Public helps nonprofits amplify their public service campaigns through everything from billboard amplification to social media, et cetera. And so by being involved in both those organizations, it keeps me grounded, not to mention all the work that my consultancy, McPherson Strategies, does with nonprofits, helping them get their stories told, helping them get funding, mainly from corporations. So I just thought it was very important to say that or share that. And I'm just going to talk to you a few minutes about considerations you should have when you are looking to bring on vendors, partners, etc. And I think if you are a social enterprise or nonprofit or NGO, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your donors to be extraordinarily choosy and picky. Most importantly, be of the utmost, I hate to use the word skepticism because it sounds so negative, but really look under the hood and make sure that the organization that you're hiring has your values and has your back. Because I think for those of you doing the type of work that nonprofits do, it's heavy lifting and our resources are minimal. And in many cases, we're working on behalf of causes that are life-saving, and maybe if not life-saving, hugely important to the constituencies we serve. So if you are going to bring, for lack of better terms, a new family member into the organization, you really have to make sure that that person understands the role of your organization, and be sure there aren't conflicts of interest, and be certain that you're, not, for instance, if you're working with an environmental, if you are an environmental nonprofit or you're working with an environmental nonprofit, you probably don't want to hire an agency that also works with major oil companies or other extraction companies that may not have your values. I'm not saying that all oil companies are bad. I mean, Lord knows I was just in a cab for an hour and a half. So, I buy gasoline and I support them. But if your fundamental mission is to advance the cause of marine protection, that it may muddy the waters if they're also working with companies that are actually potentially harming your nonprofit. I hate when I do webinars because I can't tell if anybody understands what I'm saying. I just have to assume that people are nodding their heads. But we all know what assumption is. But if you can tell me what's on the next slide, Biz, that would be great.
Yeah, the next slide says referrals are powerful, but don't hire anyone as a favor.
As a favor, yes. How many of us, and I'll take a pretend show of hands, are asked to recommend people for jobs and are asked to hire friends and friends who run consultancies? It happens all the time, and it's really easy to kind of fall into the world where we'll just jump and take a recommendation, but it's vital, and maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's vital to do the diligence necessary to determine if the agency is the right fit, if they have the skill set, if they have amazing recommendations and case studies for any type of work, whether it's marketing or PR or advertising or painting the walls. I mean, this kind of stuff needs to be, you need to vet it and just don't take a friend's word for it.
Yep.
So next slide.
The next slide says, do your homework up front. Talk to references, outline the relationship, define the scope before an issue arises.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, there is a reason that a vendor gives you a statement of work that you need to sign off on. And oftentimes in our rush to get things done, we don't pay attention. Read the fine print. Go back and forth until it is absolutely explicit what your role is, what their role is, what the dollars are, how much you owe them, when you owe them, what their deliverables are. These things are absolutely tantamount. And I guess, again, we're always in such a rush that I think we skip over these things. And if you're representing a nonprofit, it funds, you have to be extra judicious with them. So in that,
Susan,
I'll pass the baton. Yes.
Jump in and just kind of,
yeah,
you maybe think it's such a good, thing to note that, a good vendor, a professional vendor, they're going to be doing the same due diligence. They're going to make sure the scope is equally as defined. So if you're not kind of getting that pressure from a good vendor, that could be a sign of something you want to be aware of as well.
You got it. I mean, they should be willing to serve you up and provide you anything you really need to know, within reason.
Definitely.
So that's all I have.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate you being so willing to work with us across the cab situation.
Thank you. Welcome to the world of New York City, everyone.
Yeah. We're going to welcome Henry to the mic now. How to get the most from the work and for your money by being a good client.
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the things that as an agency we've learned, and we specialize in branding, strategy, design, and digital development. I think these are just sort of like the high level sort of things that we've noticed throughout the 5+ years of our agency. And at the end, I'll try to give you guys and ladies, at least a real life example of one of our clients that we've had a ton of success with. So next slide, please. Okay, it's, we start with a project. So your project, ask yourself what problem are you trying to solve? Is it a website redesign? And always ask yourself why. Is it a refresh of a brand? And always ask yourself why. I think one of the things is that we've seen organizations get mandates from certain people, whether internally or externally, or there is just sort of pressure to sort of figure out we should do this, but there's really the reason behind it is not super clear. And I think that is where I think anybody at an organization reaching out to agencies should sort of stop the brakes and really think about what are the sort of business goals or what is the sort of kind of like long-term idea. A lot of these projects, they can go on for a very long time. It could be especially something like a website redesign or a refresh of a brand. We've done a website redesign that's taken over a year. So these aren't small little projects that I think you kind of just jump into, and really being clear about the goals I think is like the first thing that is really important. And then now, with the why answered, and if you think you have that, I think that's when you can kind of create a clear RFP stating, what do you want to get out of that? If it's a redesign, is it because of what reasons? Is it for donations? Is it for clarity of messaging? And if it's a refresh of a brand, why does that need to happen, and what is happening at the organization at this time of the history of the organization where a refresh is needed. Next slide, please. So choosing an agency, I think one of the things when you're about to choose an agency, you start going through a lot of interviews with different agencies and they submit proposals. One of the things I think is really key is that agencies work in a certain way and each one has its own process. So really asking those questions about, if you understand the process of how their work is done. So whether some people want to work, let's say an example might be a waterfall or agile. Waterfall meaning, all the sort of ideas get put together, the agency goes away for a month and they come back. Something more agile could be week-to-week sprints where you talk every single week. If not, with some of our clients, we've done even twice a week. So really understanding the process, what are the sort of milestones and goals, I think are really key because every agency has something that is different and the way that works for them. So that has to work for you too. Also, I think one thing is really key is that one thing that we found is it gets very confusing when there's a lot of point people on the organization side. So making sure that one point person is actually gathering all the information from the organization so that they can really speak in one voice to the agency. And then, yeah, always ask. Always ask any question. I don't think anyone's a bad one. We're all here to learn from each other. And I think that's what makes really, really healthy relationships. Next slide. So I think once you start, I think, reiterating what I just sort of talked about was really gathering all of the organization's goals and expectations. The organization is doing a refresh of the brand, and this is what we expect from it. And having all that aligned in the beginning is really clear, and writing that out as a statement is a really good practice so that everybody not only has something to point to as long projects go. The issue is, obviously people get, in the weeds, and that's just a normal thing that happens, and you need to have some type of compass that gives you direction that you agreed upon. Now that goal and expectation midway through can change. That has happened, but at least when you have it, you understand when that is changing and why that's changing. I think from an approval process from the organization standpoint, I think one of the things that, is very difficult also is that you have an approval process on your side. We've been in a number of situations where maybe certain board members weren't told about something, and that has caused just the project to hold up and sort of redo some work. So, and that within an agency causes obviously a little bit of stress, especially the way agencies sort of allocate resources. And that goes into sort of your own internal resources. I think this is one of the things that is really having a good understanding of your own internal process and the process of the agency. It's a lot of work to engage an agency, and both sides need to really pay a lot of attention to each other and give that time. And I think that's one of the things that, internally, that you really understand that whoever's the point person, whoever the people who are on this project are given the time to be able to do the great work. Because A, you're trying to make large changes, whether it's a website redesign, whether it's a brand refresh, and you're actually, you are paying an agency. So this is money that is really valuable, and we understand that from the agency side. So really, it's really great when organizations do have those resources allocated from a time perspective to be able to do the work that's needed. Next slide. So this is the one part where at the end of a project, the one thing is like we always ask the agent, the organization, we ask ourselves, is the organization, are they self-sufficient? Can they kind of do this on their own now? If not, does a retainer need to come in? Are there still things that need to be updated? And there's, and as the project goes, there's a lot of ideas that come about, and not all of them could be done. And some of those great ideas that, you can sort of table that and put it in the parking lot and then use them later and figure out there can be a game plan after this particular project is over. How do we sort of implement those things? And then I think at the end, do you have the right analytics in place to judge if the project was successful? So whether it's pure analytics or whether that is something more do we need to hit a donation mark? Are we trying to get email signups? Things of that nature. Just making sure that after the project's done, what's the right analytics to sort of think about, and when do you want to look back at those analytics to sort of be able to compare and contrast as to how and if this project was successful or not. Next slide, please. So this is just, these are just two organizations that we work with. So one of them was Cooperman College Scholars. And these are two goals that I think I was talking about when we first started. So for Cooperman, which is a scholarship program in Newark, New Jersey through relay.edu, it was developing a new brand and a communication plan for high school students in Newark. We developed a logo for them, developed the tagline with them, and we developed a website and sort of the messaging flow of how to get kids to really sort of have an understanding of what the scholarship was about, and on top of that, how to incentivize them to understand, especially when the deadlines were. I think that was some of the largest part of the communication plan. And oddly, even though we did a lot of the digital work, a lot of the work had to be one-on-one with these kids, especially in these neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, where they really needed a one-on-one to really feel sort of secure that this is a real sort of endeavor, because a lot of what we heard was they weren't very trustworthy of a number of things. So all of that kind of came about with the design and messaging. And then on the right, it's BCRF, which is the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. We rebranded and repositioned the organization for the next 25 years. What had happened about, I believe, 4 years ago was Evelyn Lauder, who was the founder of the organization, passed from actually cancer. And I think as organizations, when that type of leadership and that type of strength and the brand identity of the organization is actually a person, the organization obviously has been doing great because of all of the work that she did. But how do you sort of step sort of out of those shadows? And one of the things that we did was really sort of think through, where do we want to not only take the logo from a design perspective, but from a communications perspective. So before, the logo was just Breast Cancer Research Foundation spelled out, but internally and externally, people would call the organization BCRF. So much like Starbucks has changed their logo recently from Starbucks Coffee to just Starbucks, it was this idea of transition. And this is a new logo for, I would say, the next 5 to 10 years. And at one point, we would love to have BCRF be such a household name that it'll just say BCRF. Next slide, please. So this is just to go through a quick example of one of the Breast Cancer Research Foundation examples. So we did all this photography to really change the way they look, and this is something that we really loved. And these are real people. This is actually a mother and a daughter, and the mother survived cancer, and we really wanted to give that connection. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of like what was actually, they asked us to reposition the organization in a crowded landscape and attract younger audiences. We refocused on the organization, its key differentiator, which is research. They do more research and put more money into research than anybody else. The branding, we refreshed the logo, like I said before. Obviously we built the site about 1.5 years ago, so it was responsive and mobile focused. And we partnered with a new sort of donation system called Classy to allow supporters to start their own fundraising campaigns. And that was very key with sort of the donation goals that were set for the redesign of the website. Next slide, please. Here's a before and after, and hopefully that when everybody sort of looking at this, hopefully you'll agree that the one on the right is actually a little bit more clear, and it works in a lot of different sizes, and I think it just has a slightly more modern look. Next slide, please. And here's just a before and after. I think messaging, design, and photography. It's all included, and even some of the stats that we tried to put in, we tried to keep it very focused on research. Next slide, please. Here's just the other part that I was talking about, which was it's across all devices, especially for a younger audience. Next slide, please. And then these were some of the results that I think that I was talking about at the end. Increase in mobile donations, increase in site traffic, and page views. And we continue to work with them, and this is where the last slide that I had, which was the end of the project, we continue to work with them not only on a retainer basis, but we also launched a marketing campaign this past year that was Cancer Divides, We Unite. And that's been very, very sort of successful and really telling this sort of heartfelt stories of relationships that people have had with cancer, whether it's your mother or whether it's a sister or whether it's yourself. And we actually had also a man who had breast cancer, because that affects about, I think, I believe the stat, and don't quote me on this, maybe 1 in 100,000 might be the number, but yeah, so it's been a really great ongoing relationship for the past 3.5 years with this client. And yeah, that's about it, and that's us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna pass the mic to Abe now. I think, I hope you guys are seeing both kind of this chance to answer these high-level questions, but also see some of the opportunities that working with great vendors can make possible for you or the organizations you work with. And Abe is going to focus on that, talking with us about how to best leverage vendors to build capacity within your org or your grantees organizations.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Biggs, for passing the mic. And yeah, I think another way that I thought of this question, right, is how to be a good client, right? And I think it's just a different way to think about some of these questions, in the sense that if that is the case, if the outcome is you have vendors who love to work with you, want to keep coming back, not only are you getting their best work, but you can kind of create such deeper partnerships that really have lasting effects. So I think clearly the story that Henry just told, that type of relationship is so ongoing that so much of the Breast Cancer Research Foundation's outcomes are kind of tied to having a really effective vendor like HDMA. So I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think this is an important thing, and I think Henry's example did a good job of showcasing this, right? Is understanding your own strengths. You kind of saw some of the before and after the shots, but I think oftentimes we see situations where either an organization is trying to do too much in-house, right? And there really could be not just a potential cost savings, even though vendors do, cost money, but really the outcome of the work is just going to be at such a different level that it really makes sense to kind of take stock of what capacity and strengths you have internally. And at the same time, though, I think there's sometimes where we might lean too much on a vendor or an outside partner, and ideally, you can, work and trust and find a partner who helps you realize those opportunities to say, we're happy to do this. We're happy for you to pay this, but I actually think you'd be better off doing this, in-house, and here's why. Or you should possibly hire somebody. And that type of, trust and relationship is hard to get to, but that would really be an effective relationship to try to look to within your vendors. And then with that, you can really find ways for them to leverage at the highest level and be as custom as possible with their solutions for you. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. Yeah, so especially when it comes to the hiring standpoint, we are constantly getting calls of organizations in dire straits and who needed to make a hire yesterday. And, again, we're always happy to kind of jump in at that level. But if we were able to be partners with them from the beginning of a search, it'd be a lot more effective for everybody involved and kind of keep things on a much better timeline, right? So try to be as proactive and plan out how and when you'll work with vendors, and also don't just consider working on solutions that are kind of one-off or short-term in nature. If you can kind of find ways to build a relationship that is over a 6 or 12-month timeline, you're going to get much better kind of buy-in from that vendor and have better kind of planning internally. And then kind of what I was saying before, by working on vendors in certain scenarios, then you can eventually look to hopefully kind of hire full-time support in the end. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is, it was a key question here in terms of not just in terms of looking at, foundations, but also, fundees within, that community. And I think, easily enough, some of the, so take for example, New Profit, who's one of our clients. Just by happenstance, we ended up kind of, helping to fill roles at, 5 of their, fundees, 5 of the, organizations within their, portfolio. And it was really interesting because we weren't connecting the dots, but now that we have, it allows for us to, help search for a role for New Profit that could also be, useful for one of their portfolio companies. You can actually share candidates, right? So you have a scenario there that because they're working with the same partner, they can really cross-leverage some of the insights and work that a vendor is doing for them. That is, is a win-win for everybody involved. And another thing is that don't stress that process of having to go out and kind of build a potential list of vendors from the ground up when within your community you might already have access to some people that you may not have known of before, and there's no need to kind of reinvent that list. And lastly, you're kind of trusting somebody who's already within the mission element of the work. That is really important. And that's just a great kind of vetting tool. And I agree with kind of the previous statement what kind of Susan said about don't just trust referrals, but when it's a kind of actual seeing the work that somebody else has done within your existing community, you can't get closer to seeing the outcome ahead of time. Perfect. We'll kind of finish with my last slide, which is just my my contact information. It was a pleasure speaking to all of you today, and I'll hand it back over to Biz to keep us moving.
Great, thank you, Abe. We are, of course, coming to the end of the hour, and we're going to welcome Sarah to share her thoughts in a second here. But I just wanted to ask, if you have questions that you have lingering or that you've been holding on to, please start to type them into the question box so that we don't waste any time and can start to answer your questions and still hold to the 4 o'clock end time. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Biz. All right, so I'm going to be chatting here about what it means to do good as an agency or a service provider. There's this common perception of people who work in agencies that they're mercenaries, that they're vampires, and they're just there to suck up all of your resources and your money, and that they don't care about your work. They're just going to take your money and run. And I have to say I've met people like that who work in agencies. So I would say everyone who's here on this call is definitely not like that. And there are many agencies who are good and thoughtful partners, all of which Susan, Henry, and Abe have alluded to on this call. So I'm going to walk you through different ways that as a service provider or someone who works in an agency that you can still do good in your career while working with clients. So first, there's 2 things to define here. One is doing work for good causes, and the other is doing good work. And both of them have mutual value and can produce good in the world, and I'm going to walk you through the difference between the 2. Next slide, please. So doing work for good. This one is relatively self-explanatory. Doing work for good means working with mission-driven clients, whether they're nonprofits, foundations, or for good brands. But also, many agencies will take on pro bono clients. For example, it wouldn't be uncommon for a law firm to take on a pro bono client or for an agency to take on one. And those projects tend to be very discreetly scoped. And also, sometimes they can be really sweet tax write-offs at the end of the year. Of course, there is doing work that is a good in and of itself. This would be, for example, perhaps like running advertisements for breast cancer research, such as what Henry was describing. Like, while you're running ads, you are promoting a cause, and that in and of itself is good. So sometimes it's a little bit more doing the work that you'd be doing for a regular client, though on behalf of a company that is doing good. And then, of course, the way that I look at Loyal's work is that the work that we do in community is in and of itself something that is good and provides mutual value both towards our clients as well as for anybody who's involved in the community. Then, of course, there's making work for good sustainable. So that means if you're working with a nonprofit, you're probably not making a very high margin as a service provider. Therefore, you're balancing that out alongside projects that are significantly more high margin. So that's something to think about and to take into account when you take on for good clients, is that you need to make sure that you are still keeping the lights on, that at the end of the day, your margins are evening out, and that whatever losses you might choose to be taking on behalf of your for good clients, you're making it up with other clients that maybe are less cool or sexy, but nonetheless help you pay the bills. Next slide. And then there's doing good work, and this is where I think many agencies toe the line and where I believe the most opportunity is when you're working with foundations and nonprofits and for good companies. One, there's just straight up operating with ethics. Within the agency world, there's a lot of standard business practices that are simply outdated, and they've just always been that way. So I'm a huge fan of revisiting a lot of our standard practice on a regular basis and being like, does this practice still make sense in today's world? Is this ethical in today's context? Could we be doing better on behalf of our clients? And oftentimes the answer is yes, that there is a change that we can be making to making our relationships with our clients more mutually beneficial, whether it be through a contract clause or a payment term or simply being much more friendly. Of course, there's also making decisions for the cause rather than yourself. Sometimes you are going to make decisions as an agency or a service provider that are not necessarily in your best interest. So for example, you will choose not to take on a scope of work because you believe that a client should do it in-house, such as what Abe referenced earlier. Or you will recommend that you take a route that is less profitable for you but will accomplish the goals in the same manner as another path. There is an ad marketing agency that Loyal sometimes partners with called Dozen Digital, and they have a business model that I'm a huge fan of. For anybody who buys advertising, the way that you normally pay for it is by a percentage of ad spend. So if you spend $10,000, you're paying $3,000 to have that ad spend managed. Though in that kind of setup, you are incentivized to convince your client to spend as much money as possible on ads, which is not necessarily in your client's best interest. So Jim at Dozen Digital has done this really smart thing where he decoupled his compensation from the amount of ad spend, and instead he charges on an hourly basis on how much time it takes to manage that. And so that way he is acting in his client's best interest and on behalf of their cause. And that goes right along with being a good advocate for your clients and a steward of their resources. You know, many nonprofits and foundations, they're not necessarily as tech savvy as the standard client, and of course there are many exceptions, and I hope that no one takes offense to that comment. We recently just had a client who wanted to go with a different agency for brand identity, though we know that while it might be cheaper for them today, it's actually going to cost them a lot more money down the line in terms of operations and production of their campaign work. So we straight up told them, we're like, hey, we know that you're trying to cut the costs now, but we know this is going to cost you nearly double in the long run. Therefore, this is our best plan of action that we recommend. And making those calls on your clients and really taking the time to explain the process to them and be a good steward on behalf of their resources can really make a huge difference in your work. And then last but not least, service providers and the agencies are not known for treating their employees well. They tend to be very churn and burn with the way they approach talent, particularly young talents. And at Loyal, we really do try to treat all of our team members well. We work on an assembled team basis, so we're constantly onboarding and offboarding a number of contractors, and we really try to respect their personal time, as opposed to other agencies that try to get the most bang for their buck necessarily. But my friend Mitch, who recently left an agency, he said this really profound comment to me that stuck with me. He said, you know, it's not just about your people, it's about our people. It's about the people who work at the agency, it's about the client's people, it's about your partner's people, and it's about respecting everyone and making sure you're taking care of everyone. Because as soon as you start saying about taking care of our people, you're implying that your people are more important than other people. And really, in the agency world, we need to do a better job of taking care of everyone. And I think that's about it.
It is. I want to thank all of you for sharing your expertise and your time. The contact information for everyone was supposed to be on this slide, but of course I erased it. So I'm going to ask you to all please tune in by the end of the week to the website so you can find easy ways to follow up with any of these wonderful speakers about questions that you have and/or possibilities for working together. And just to close it out, I was kind of taking notes along the way, and I hope others were as well. But it seems to me that whether you're looking for a caterer or you're really looking for a long-term kind of companion in your strategy or to help you take over portions of what you're trying to do, either in your work at the foundation or with grantees or another organization you work at going forward. Some of the themes I've heard come up are to take your time and really plan ahead and allow yourself to explore what your values are and make sure that you're building relationships with vendors and service providers who share your values, who share your dedication, and build those clear expectations and strong communication bridges between you. These are definitely partnership opportunities. I think we all know the difference between a great working relationship and one that leaves people with a sour taste in their mouth. So thank you to the four of you for doing great work in the world, and thank you for helping us continue to build those partnerships with organizations that really allow us to do the work we all want to be doing. And thank you all for joining EPIP for this webinar. I am at biz@epip.org with any questions and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Have a great day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.